Hashtag the last straw, when family becomes the enemy. I used to believe that family was everything. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Richardson household, I was taught that sacrifice for family was noble, that putting others first was virtuous, and that blood was thicker than water. For 28 years, I lived by these principles, pouring my heart, soul, and bank account into keeping my family afloat. It took me nearly 3 decades to realize that I wasn't a beloved daughter and sister. I was a cash cow with a college degree. My name is Sarah Richardson, and this is the story of how I went from being the family's golden goose to becoming their worst nightmare. It started innocently enough. After graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in finance, I landed a coveted position at Goldman Sachs in Chicago. My starting salary was more money than my parents had ever seen, and I was proud to share it. When Dad's construction business hit a rough patch during the 2008 recession, I didn't hesitate to write a check for $20,000 to keep the lights on. When my younger brother Jake needed money for his revolutionary tech startup that would change the world, I invested $50,000 without batting an eye. When my sister Emma wanted to pursue her dream of becoming a fashion designer in New York, I covered her rent and living expenses for 2 years while she found her footing. I told myself I was being a good daughter, a supportive sister. I was investing in my family's future, helping them achieve their dreams. The gratitude in their eyes, the tight hugs, the promises to pay me back as soon as things picked up, it all felt worth it. I was the successful one, the responsible one, the one who could afford to be generous. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly transforming from a beloved family member into a walking ATM. The pattern established itself so gradually that I didn't notice it at first. Family dinners became financial planning sessions. Phone calls from my parents always started with "How are you, honey?" but quickly pivoted to, "We have a small problem we need to discuss." Jake's startup failed spectacularly, but instead of finding a job, he moved back home and started 3 more revolutionary ventures, each requiring more substantial funding than the last. Emma's fashion career never took off, but she had cultivated expensive tastes during her time in New York and couldn't bear to lower her standards by working a regular job. Meanwhile, my parents had become accustomed to my financial contributions. The $20,000 I'd given Dad had grown into a monthly stipend of $3,000 to cover their mortgage, car payments, and lifestyle expenses. Mom had developed a shopping addiction, justified by the fact that she was finally able to enjoy life after years of struggling. They'd refinanced their house twice, using my good credit as a co-signer, and had racked up over $60,000 in credit card debt that they expected me to handle. The psychological manipulation was subtle but effective. When I occasionally expressed concern about the mounting financial burden, I was met with wounded looks and guilt-inducing statements. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," Mom would say, tears welling in her eyes. "After everything we've done for you, raising you, supporting your education, and this is how you repay us." Dad would chime in with his disappointed voice, "Sarah, family helps family. That's what we do. I thought we raised you better than this." Jake had perfected the art of emotional blackmail. He would call me at work, voice shaking with manufactured desperation. "Sarah, I know you're tired of helping me, but this is it. This is the big one. If you can just loan me $30,000 for this cryptocurrency venture, I'll be able to pay you back everything I owe you, plus interest. But if I miss this opportunity, I'll never forgive myself, and I'll never be able to get back on my feet." He always had a deadline, always had a reason why this particular investment was different from all the others. Emma had taken a different approach. She'd moved back to Chicago but maintained her expensive lifestyle by making me feel guilty about my success. "It must be nice to have so much money that you don't even know what to do with it," she'd say whenever I mentioned being tired or stressed about work. "Some of us are still struggling to make ends meet while you're living in your fancy downtown apartment." The implication was always clear. I had more than I needed, and it was my moral obligation to share. The worst part was that I had internalized their narrative. I worked 80-hour weeks, climbed the corporate ladder, and increased my salary year after year, but I never felt like I was allowed to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Every raise was met with increased expectations from my family. Every bonus was already allocated before I received it. I lived in a modest apartment, drove an old car, and wore the same 3 professional outfits to work because every spare dollar went to supporting my family's dreams and lifestyle. I had no social life because I was always either working or dealing with family crises. My few attempts at dating ended badly because I couldn't explain why I was always stressed about money despite having a high-paying job. I was isolated, exhausted, and slowly drowning in the financial and emotional burden of carrying 4 other adults on my shoulders. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in March. I had just received a substantial bonus, $50,000, for closing a major deal that had consumed my life for 6 months. I was exhausted but excited, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I could finally treat myself to something nice. Perhaps a vacation, or a new wardrobe, or just the luxury of putting money into my savings account for once. I was barely through the door of my apartment when my phone rang. It was Dad, and his voice had that familiar edge of forced casualness that meant he was about to ask for money. "Sarah, honey, congratulations on the bonus. Your mother and I are so proud of you." I should have hung up right then. I should have recognized the warning signs. Instead, I found myself asking, "How did you know about the bonus?" "Oh, Jake mentioned it. You told him earlier, remember?" I didn't remember telling Jake anything, but I let it slide. "Thanks, Dad. I'm pretty excited about it." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Listen, your mother and I were hoping we could talk to you about something. We've been presented with an incredible opportunity." My stomach dropped. "What kind of opportunity?" "Well, you know how we've always talked about retiring somewhere warm? We found the perfect place, a beautiful condo in Florida, right on the beach. The owner is motivated to sell, and if we can come up with a down payment of $40,000 by next week, we can get it for a steal." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the sensation of being cornered. "Dad, I just got this bonus. I was hoping to maybe save some of it for once." "Sarah, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The real estate market down there is booming. This isn't just an expense, it's an investment. Plus, think about how happy your mother would be. She's been so stressed lately, and the doctor says the warm weather would be good for her arthritis." Before I could respond, I heard Mom's voice in the background. "Tell her we'll pay her back as soon as we sell the house here." I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. How much would the monthly payments be? Only about $1,500 a month. We'd cover it ourselves, of course, but you know how tight things have been since I reduced my hours. Dad had reduced his hours 2 years ago, which was a euphemism for semi-retirement funded by my monthly contributions. The $1,500 would inevitably become my responsibility, just like everything else. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course, honey, but we do need to know by tomorrow. The seller has other interested parties." After I hung up, I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the bonus notification on my phone. $50,000 that I'd earned through months of sacrifice, stress, and sleepless nights. $50,000 that my family already considered theirs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself doing something I'd never done before. I calculated exactly how much money I'd given my family over the years. I went through bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, and receipts. I made spreadsheets and charts. I documented every payment, every loan, every investment I'd made in their lives. The number was staggering, over $400,000 in 7 years. $400,000 that could have been my down payment on a house, my retirement fund, my security blanket. $400,000 that had disappeared into the black hole of my family's financial irresponsibility. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the realization that I had become a non-person in my own family. I existed solely to solve their problems and fund their dreams. When was the last time someone had asked me about my goals, my dreams, my struggles? When was the last time I'd received support instead of giving it? When was the last time I'd felt like a daughter and sister instead of an ATM with legs? The next morning, I called Dad back. "I can't give you the $40,000. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the explosion. "Sarah, I am disappointed in you. Your mother and I have sacrificed everything for this family, and when we finally ask for help with something important, you turn your back on us. Dad, I've given you over $400,000 in the past 7 years. That's different. That was helping out with emergencies and supporting your brother and sister's dreams. This is about your parents' future. My brother has started and failed 6 businesses with my money. Emma hasn't had a job in 3 years. You and Mom haven't made a mortgage payment without my help since 2015. How is this different? Because we're your parents. Dad's voice was rising. We raised you. We supported you. We made you who you are today. Everything you have is because of us. That was the moment. That single sentence. Everything you have is because of us. 28 years of guilt, manipulation, and financial abuse crystallized into perfect clarity. I realized that in my family's eyes, I had no right to my own success. I was not a person with my own dreams, goals, and needs. I was a resource to be exploited, a golden goose to be plucked clean. No, I said quietly. Everything I have is because of me. Because I studied harder than anyone else in my class. Because I worked 80-hour weeks while Jake was smoking weed and playing video games. Because I sacrificed my social life, my relationships, and my happiness to climb the corporate ladder while Emma was shopping and brunching her way through New York on my dime. Everything I have is because I earned it. Sarah, you're being selfish and ungrateful. Your mother is crying right now because of what you're saying. Then maybe it's time for Mom to cry about something real instead of crying to manipulate me into giving her more money. I hung up before he could respond. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up. Jake called me screaming about how I was destroying the family. Emma sent me a series of text messages calling me a selfish bitch who had forgotten where she came from. Mom left a voicemail sobbing about how she couldn't believe she had raised such a heartless daughter. But for the first time in years, I felt free. I spent the weekend researching therapists who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. I made an appointment for the following week. I also made another appointment with a financial advisor who could help me understand exactly how much damage had been done to my financial future and how to repair it. Dr. Patricia Hoffman was a small woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner. During our first session, she listened to my story without judgment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, what you've described is a textbook case of financial abuse combined with emotional manipulation. Your family has been exploiting you for years, and they've conditioned you to believe that this exploitation is normal and even morally required. But they're my family, I said, the programmed response falling automatically from my lips. Family members don't exploit each other. Family members don't exist solely to solve other people's problems. Family members support each other, which means they also respect each other's boundaries and independence. I just feel so guilty. They're struggling, and I have more than I need. Dr. Hoffman leaned forward. Sarah, do you realize that you're living like a person who makes $30,000 a year despite earning over $200,000? Do you realize that you have less than $10,000 in savings despite being in the top 5% of earners in this country? Do you realize that you're financially less secure than people who make a quarter of your salary? She was right. My family had conditioned me to believe that financial security was selfish, that saving money was greedy, that investing in my own future was betraying them. They had convinced me that I was rich when I was actually drowning in their financial obligations. What do? I asked. First, you establish boundaries. You stop giving them money, period. You stop taking responsibility for their financial crises. You stop allowing them to make their poor decisions your problem. They'll hate me. Sarah, they already don't respect you. They see you as a resource, not a person. Real love doesn't come with financial conditions. Dr. Hoffman helped me craft a plan. I would write a letter to my family explaining that I was no longer able to provide financial support. I would make it clear that this was not a negotiation or a temporary situation. It was a permanent boundary. I would offer to help them find resources for financial counseling and job placement services, but I would no longer be their personal bank. The letter was harder to write than I expected. I drafted it a dozen times, each version softer than the last. Dr. Hoffman had to remind me repeatedly that I was not responsible for their feelings or their reactions. I was only responsible for my own well-being and my own future. The final version was simple and direct. Dear family, after much reflection, I have decided that I can no longer provide financial support to anyone. This decision is final and non-negotiable. I need to focus on my own financial security and future. I understand that this may be difficult news, but I believe it will ultimately be healthier for all of us. I am happy to help you find resources for financial counseling, job placement services, or other forms of support that don't involve me personally funding your expenses. I love you all, but I can no longer sacrifice my own financial well-being for yours. Sarah, I sent individual copies to my parents, Jake, and Emma on a Sunday evening. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed early. When I turned my phone back on Monday morning, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The voicemails ranged from tearful pleas to furious accusations. Mom sobbed that I was abandoning them in their time of need. Dad raged about my ingratitude and selfishness. Jake accused me of being jealous of his entrepreneurial spirit. Emma called me a cold-hearted bitch who had forgotten her roots. The text messages were worse. Jake sent me a series of increasingly aggressive messages, culminating in a threat to make me pay for destroying the family. Emma's messages were calculated to wound. I hope you're happy living alone in your selfish little world. Don't come crying to us when you're old and alone and realize that money can't buy you love. But mixed in with the anger and manipulation were messages that revealed the truth of their characters. Jake's girlfriend sent me a message meant for him. Just get a job like everyone else. Your sister isn't responsible for supporting you forever. Emma's best friend accidentally sent me a screenshot of Emma's text to her. I can't believe Sarah is finally standing up for herself. I always thought she was an idiot for letting them walk all over her. But this is going to screw up my whole lifestyle. The mask was slipping away from me. They had been laughing about how easy I was to manipulate. They had been planning their next financial requests before I'd even fulfilled the current ones. They had been living large on my dime while mocking me for being a pushover. The next few weeks were brutal. My family launched a full-scale campaign to break down my resolve. They tried everything: guilt, anger, manipulation, false promises, fake emergencies, and even threats. Mom claimed to be having chest pains and needed money for medical bills. Dad said the bank was foreclosing on their house, and they needed $40,000 immediately. Jake said he was suicidal and needed money for therapy. Emma said she was being evicted and would be homeless without my help. Each crisis was designed to trigger my lifelong conditioning to sacrifice myself for their well-being. Each emergency was carefully crafted to make me feel guilty, selfish, and responsible for their suffering. But Dr. Hoffman had prepared me for this. She had warned me that the manipulation would intensify when they realized I was serious about my boundaries. She helped me understand that their crises were not my responsibility, that their poor financial decisions were not my fault, and that their emotional manipulation was not love. I verified each emergency independently. Mom's chest pains were anxiety attacks brought on by the stress of having to budget for the first time in years. Dad's foreclosure notice was real, but it was the result of years of financial mismanagement, not a sudden catastrophe. Jake wasn't suicidal. He was angry that his free ride was over. Emma wasn't being evicted. Her landlord had simply asked her to start paying rent on time. I held firm. I didn't send money. I didn't cave to the guilt trips. I didn't take responsibility for their crises. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I moved to a beautiful apartment in downtown Chicago, something I'd always wanted but never felt I could afford. I bought a new car, nothing extravagant, but reliable and safe. I hired a personal trainer and started taking care of my health. I joined a book club and started dating again. For the first time in my adult life, I had money in my savings account. I maxed out my 401k contributions. I opened a Roth IRA. I bought stocks and bonds. I invested in my future instead of throwing money into the black hole of my family's financial irresponsibility. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was psychological. I started sleeping better. I stopped having anxiety attacks about money. I began to enjoy my work again instead of seeing it as a grinding obligation to fund other people's dreams. I rediscovered interests and hobbies I'd abandoned years ago. 3 months after I sent the letter, Jake showed up at my apartment. He was thinner than I'd ever seen him, with dark circles under his eyes and a desperate energy that made me keep the door chain locked. "Sarah, we need to talk. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize I've been unfair to you. I want to make things right." "Jake, I'm not giving you money. That's not what this is about. I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I realize I've been taking advantage of you. I want to apologize and start over." I wanted to believe him. Part of me still loved the brother I'd grown up with, the one who taught me to ride a bike and defended me from bullies. But Dr. Hoffman had warned me about this too: the fake apology, the manufactured moment of clarity, the attempt to reset the relationship so the exploitation could begin again. "I appreciate the apology, Jake, but I'm not changing my mind about the financial support." His facade cracked almost immediately. "Sarah, I'm desperate here. I've got creditors calling me every day. I'm about to lose my apartment. I just need enough to get back on my feet, and then I'll never ask you for anything again. You said that about the restaurant idea, and the app development company, and the cryptocurrency venture, and the dropshipping business, and the social media marketing agency, and the day trading scheme. This is different. I've learned from my mistakes. Jake, the only mistake you've learned from is relying on me to fund your mistakes. Get a job. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment when he realized that I wasn't going to cave. His expression shifted from desperation to cold calculation. You know, Sarah, I never wanted to tell you this, but people talk. Everyone in the family knows you're just a selfish bitch who thinks she's better than everyone else because she has money. They all talk about how you lord your success over us, how you make us grovel for help just so you can feel superior. If that's what they think, then I guess it's better that we don't have a relationship. You're going to regret this. Family is all you have, and you're throwing it away for what? Money? You're going to end up old and alone, and we won't be there for you. Jake, you haven't been there for me in years. None of you have. You've been there for my money, but not for me. After he left, I called Dr. Hoffman. I was shaking, partly from anger and partly from the fear that maybe he was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was destroying my family for money. Sarah, let me ask you something. In the past 7 years, how many times has your family asked you about your goals, your dreams, your struggles? How many times have they offered you emotional support when you were stressed or unhappy? How many times have they celebrated your successes without immediately asking for money? I thought about it for a long time. The answer was 0. They don't love you, Sarah. They love what you can do for them. That's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix. 6 months after I'd sent the letter, I was thriving. I'd been promoted to vice president at my firm, partly because I was finally able to focus on my career instead of constantly dealing with family financial crises. I'd started dating a wonderful man named David who was a teacher, someone who earned a modest salary but managed his money responsibly and never asked me to solve his problems. I'd also started volunteering with a financial literacy program for young adults. Teaching people to manage money, set boundaries, and avoid exploitation gave me a sense of purpose that I'd never found in funding my family's lifestyle. My parents made one last attempt to guilt me back into the fold. They sent Emma to my apartment with a card and a batch of my favorite cookies. Emma looked genuinely upset, which surprised me. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize I've been a terrible sister to you. Thank you for saying that, Emma. I want you to know that I've gotten a job. I'm working at a boutique downtown, and I'm starting to pay my own bills. It's been hard, but I'm learning to be independent. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Emma was genuinely changing. Maybe she was finally growing up. I'm proud of you, Emma. That's not easy to do. Sarah, the thing is, I'm struggling a little bit with the transition. I'm not used to living on a budget, and I've made some mistakes with my credit cards. I was hoping you could help me just one more time. Maybe $5,000 to get me caught up, and then I promise I'll never ask you for money again. The hope died as quickly as it had bloomed. Even her apology had been a setup for another financial request. No, Emma. But Sarah, I'm really trying to change. I just need a little help to get started. Emma, if you're really trying to change, then you need to learn to solve your own problems. There are debt counseling services, budgeting apps, financial advisors. There are ways to handle credit card debt that don't involve me writing you a check. I can't believe you're being so heartless. I'm your sister. Sisters support each other, Emma. They don't exploit each other. She left in tears, but I felt nothing but relief. The old Sarah would have written the check and felt guilty about setting a boundary. The new Sarah understood that enabling someone's financial irresponsibility wasn't love, it was codependence. A year after I'd sent the letter, I was having dinner with David when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from my hometown. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Jake's ex-girlfriend, Melissa. She was calling to let me know that Jake had been arrested for check fraud. He'd been writing bad checks to cover his rent and credit card payments, and the scheme had finally caught up with him. She thought I should know because he'd been telling people that I was still supporting him financially, and she didn't want me to get dragged into his legal troubles. I felt a moment of sadness for the brother I'd once known, but I also felt gratitude. I was grateful that I'd established boundaries before his poor decisions could destroy my life too. I was grateful that I'd learned to distinguish between love and exploitation. I was grateful that I'd chosen my own well-being over my family's manipulation. 2 years after I'd sent the letter, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. It was from my cousin Lisa, who was getting married in California. I'd always been close to Lisa, but we'd lost touch after I'd set boundaries with my immediate family. I debated whether to attend. I wasn't sure if my parents would be there, and I wasn't sure how I'd handle seeing them after 2 years of no contact. But Lisa had always been different from the rest of my family. She'd worked her way through college, built a successful career, and never asked me for money. I decided to go. The wedding was beautiful, and Lisa looked radiant. I was surprised by how many extended family members came up to me to say hello. Several of them mentioned that they'd heard about my family situation and wanted me to know that they supported my decision. "Your parents always expected you to take care of everyone," my Aunt Carol said. "It wasn't fair to you, and I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself. I always wondered why you were supporting a bunch of grown adults who were perfectly capable of working," my Uncle Jim added. "I thought you were crazy, but I guess you were just too nice for your own good." My parents were at the wedding, but they kept their distance. I caught them staring at me from across the room, and I could see the hurt and anger in their eyes. But I also noticed that they looked older, more tired. Mom had clearly been crying, and Dad's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before. During the reception, Emma approached me. She looked different, older, more mature, less entitled. She was wearing a simple dress instead of the designer clothes she'd favored when I was funding her lifestyle. "Sarah, can we talk?" We stepped outside onto the hotel's patio. The sun was setting over the Pacific, and the air was warm and salty. "I owe you a real apology," Emma said. "Not the fake one I gave you when I was trying to get money. A real one." "Okay. I've been in therapy for the past year, and I've been working through a lot of things. I realized that I've been a terrible sister to you. I took advantage of your kindness, and I never appreciated the sacrifices you made for me. Thank you for saying that. I want you to know that I have a job now, a real job. I'm working as a marketing coordinator for a small firm, and I'm paying all my own bills. I'm even starting to pay back some of the debt I accumulated when you were supporting me. I'm proud of you, Emma. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking for money or anything else. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to be a better person." For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my real sister instead of a manipulative stranger. We talked for another hour, and I learned that Emma had been struggling with depression and anxiety for years. She'd been using shopping and spending as a coping mechanism, and she'd been so focused on maintaining her lifestyle that she'd never dealt with her underlying issues. "I'm not making excuses," she said. "I'm just trying to understand how I became someone who could treat you the way I did. I appreciate that, Emma. I really do. Sarah, can I ask you something? Are you happy?" I thought about it for a moment. "Yes, I am. For the first time in my adult life, I'm genuinely happy." "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." We hugged goodbye, and I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. Emma might genuinely be changing, but I also knew that forgiveness didn't mean I had to go back to the old relationship. I could wish her well and still maintain the boundaries that had saved my life. My parents didn't approach me at the wedding, but I could feel their eyes on me throughout the evening. As I was leaving, Mom intercepted me in the hotel lobby. "Sarah, please, can we just talk for a minute?" She looked frail and older than her years. Her hair was gray, and her clothes were obviously purchased from a discount store. For a moment, I felt the old pull of guilt and responsibility. "Hi, Mom. Sarah, I miss you so much. I know we made mistakes, but we're still family. Can't we work this out?" "Mom, I don't have anything to work out. I'm doing well. I'm happy. I'm financially secure. I have healthy relationships. I have a life that I'm proud of. But we're your family. We love you." "Mom, love isn't asking someone to sacrifice their future for your present. Love isn't making someone responsible for your financial decisions. Love isn't treating someone like an ATM. We never treated you like an ATM. Mom, I gave you over $400,000 in 7 years. In all that time, did you ever once ask me about my dreams, my goals, my struggles? Did you ever once offer me emotional support? Did you ever once celebrate my successes without immediately asking for money?" She was quiet for a long moment. "We were struggling, Sarah. We needed help. You were struggling because you made poor financial decisions. You refinanced your house twice to fund your lifestyle. You racked up credit card debt on unnecessary purchases. You enabled Jake's business failures and Emma's shopping addiction. You chose to struggle, and you chose to make your struggles my responsibility. I can't believe you're being so cruel. Mom, I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, I'm prioritizing my own well-being over your financial irresponsibility. That's not cruel. That's healthy. What about when you're older? What about when you need help? Mom, I'm building my own financial security. I'm investing in my retirement. I'm creating a life that doesn't depend on exploiting other people. I'm taking care of myself. But family is supposed to take care of each other. You're right. Family is supposed to take care of each other. But that means everyone takes care of everyone, not one person taking care of everyone else. She started to cry. I don't know how to fix this, Sarah. I don't know how to make things right. Mom, you can't fix this by asking me to go back to the way things were. You can fix this by taking responsibility for your own life, making better financial decisions, and treating me like a daughter instead of a bank account. I don't know how to do that. There are resources available. Financial counselors, therapists, support groups. There are ways to learn to manage money and build healthy relationships. But I can't do it for you, and I can't fund your learning process. I left her crying in the hotel lobby. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it was also one of the most necessary. I'd spent years trying to fix my family's problems, and all I'd accomplished was enabling their dysfunction while destroying my own life. 3 years after I'd sent the letter, I married David in a small ceremony attended by close friends and a few family members. Lisa, my Aunt Carol, my Uncle Jim, and Emma. My parents weren't invited. Jake was in prison. Emma had continued to work on herself and had become a genuinely different person. She'd paid off her debt, built a small savings account, and was in a healthy relationship with a man who shared her values. She'd also started volunteering with a program that helped young women develop financial literacy skills. I want to make sure other people don't make the mistakes I made, she told me. I want to help people understand that financial independence is freedom, not selfishness. David and I bought a house together, a beautiful Victorian in Evanston with a garden and a front porch. I'd never imagined I could afford something so lovely, but it turned out that when you're not supporting 4 other adults, you can build a pretty nice life for yourself. I'd also started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students who were struggling with family financial pressure. I wanted to help young people who were facing the same challenges I'd faced, the pressure to sacrifice their own futures for their family's immediate needs. For years after I'd sent the letter, I received a call from my father. He was calling from the hospital, where Mom was recovering from a heart attack. Sarah, I know we haven't talked in a long time, but your mother is asking for you. The doctors say she might not make it. I felt the familiar tug of guilt and obligation. The old Sarah would have dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. The new Sarah took a deep breath and thought carefully about what I wanted to do. Dad, I'm sorry to hear about Mom's condition. I hope she recovers. Sarah, please. She's your mother. Can't you put aside whatever anger you're feeling and just come see her? Dad, I'm not angry. I'm protective of myself and my well-being. There's a difference. She's dying, Sarah. Dad, I'm not responsible for Mom's health problems. I'm not responsible for her emotional state. I'm not responsible for her regrets. I'm only responsible for my own life and my own choices. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Dad, taking care of myself isn't selfish. Refusing to be manipulated isn't selfish. Protecting my mental health isn't selfish. What was selfish was expecting one person to fund 4 people's lifestyles while getting nothing in return. I hung up before he could respond. David found me sitting in our garden, staring at the roses I'd planted the previous spring. He sat down beside me and took my hand. How are you feeling? He asked. Sad, I said honestly. Not guilty, not responsible, just sad. Sad that my family chose money over relationships. Sad that they never learned to love me without conditions. Sad that even now, facing Mom's mortality, Dad is still trying to manipulate me. Do you want to go see her? I thought about it carefully. No. If she wanted a relationship with me, she's had 4 years to reach out without asking for money. If she wanted to apologize, she could have done it at any time. I'm not going to let her deathbed become another opportunity for emotional manipulation. Mom survived the heart attack. She also didn't call me when she recovered. Neither did Dad. Their silence spoke volumes about their priorities. They'd rather have no relationship with me than a relationship without financial benefits. 5 years after I'd sent the letter, Jake was released from prison. He'd served 3 years for check fraud and had apparently participated in financial responsibility programs while incarcerated. He sent me a letter, not asking for money or help, but simply apologizing for the pain he'd caused. Sarah, the letter read, I know I have no right to contact you, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I've spent the past 3 years thinking about my choices and their consequences. I realize now that I destroyed our relationship through my selfishness and entitlement. I took advantage of your kindness and never appreciated the sacrifices you made for me. I'm working now. I have a job at a warehouse, and I'm living in a halfway house. I'm learning to take responsibility for my own life, and I'm trying to become someone worthy of forgiveness, even if that forgiveness never comes. I hope you're happy and successful, and I'm sorry for the years I stole from you. The letter surprised me. It was the first communication from my family that didn't contain a request, a guilt trip, or an attempt at manipulation. It was simply an acknowledgement of harm done and responsibility taken. I didn't respond to the letter, but I kept it. Maybe someday Jake and I could have some kind of relationship again. Maybe not. But for the first time, he'd communicated with me as one adult to another, rather than as a child demanding support from a parent. 6 years after I'd sent the letter, Emma got engaged. She called to tell me the news and to ask if I'd be her maid of honor. Emma, I'm honored that you asked, but I don't think that's a good idea. We're still rebuilding our relationship, and I think it's too soon for me to take on that kind of role. I understand, she said, and I could tell she genuinely did. Would you be willing to come to the wedding as a guest? Yes, I'd like that. Emma's wedding was small and elegant. She'd chosen to have a modest celebration that she and her fiancé could afford themselves. She looked genuinely happy, and her fiancé, Mark, seemed like a kind and responsible man. During the reception, Emma pulled me aside. Sarah, I have something I want to give you. She handed me an envelope. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $5,000. Emma, you don't owe me money. Yes, I do. I owe you a lot more than this, actually. I've been saving money from every paycheck, and I want to pay you back for what I took from you. It's going to take me years, but I want to do it. Emma, I don't need the money. This isn't about what you need. This is about what I need. I need to take responsibility for my actions. I need to pay my debts. I need to prove to myself that I'm not the person I used to be. I looked at the check, then at my sister. She'd grown into someone I could respect. Okay, thank you. There's something else, Emma said. Mark and I are planning to start a family soon, and I want you to know that our children will know their Aunt Sarah. They'll know about the sacrifices you made and the boundaries you set. They'll learn about financial responsibility and treating family members with respect. For the first time in years, I felt hope about my family relationships. Maybe not all of them could be salvaged, but maybe some could be rebuilt on healthier foundations. 7 years after I'd sent the letter, David and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Grace. As I held her in the hospital, I made a promise to myself and to her. She would never be responsible for other people's financial decisions. She would learn to be generous without being exploited, kind without being a doormat, and loving without being conditional. Emma was one of our first visitors in the hospital. She brought a small gift, a children's book about a little girl who learns to say no. I thought Grace should learn early, Emma said with a smile. My parents didn't visit. They didn't call. They didn't acknowledge Grace's birth in any way. Their silence confirmed what I'd known for years. Their love had always been conditional, and when I stopped meeting their conditions, their love disappeared. 8 years after I'd sent the letter, I received news that Dad had passed away suddenly from a stroke. Emma called to tell me about the funeral arrangements. I'm not going, I told her. I understand, she said, but I thought you should know that Mom is really struggling. She's alone now, and she's scared. Emma, I'm sorry she's struggling, but she made her choices. She chose money over relationships. She chose manipulation over love. She chose entitlement over respect. These are the consequences of those choices. I know. I just thought you should know. After Dad's funeral, Mom tried one last time to re-establish contact. She sent me a card with a photo of Grace that she'd somehow obtained, probably from Emma. Sarah, the card read, I know I've made mistakes, but life is short. I want to know my granddaughter. I want to be part of your life. Can we please try again? I showed the card to David. What do you think? I think, he said carefully, that you need to ask yourself what trying again would mean. Does she want a relationship with you and Grace? Or Or does she want access to your financial resources now that dad is gone and she's facing retirement with no savings? I thought about it for several days. Then I wrote Mom a letter. Dear Mom, I received your card about wanting to be part of Grace's life. I'm willing to consider building a relationship with you, but it would have to be on the following terms. 1. No requests for money, ever, under any circumstances. 2. No guilt trips about family obligations or how much you sacrificed for me. 3. No attempts to manipulate me through Grace. 4. If you want to see Grace, you'll need to demonstrate over time that you can have a healthy relationship with me first. 5. You'll need to acknowledge the harm you caused through years of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. If you're willing to accept these terms and demonstrate through your actions that you can respect my boundaries, we can start with occasional phone calls and see how it goes. If these terms are unacceptable to you, then I wish you well, but we won't have a relationship. Sarah. I never received a response. 10 years after I'd sent the letter, I was promoted to senior vice president at my firm. I'd built a reputation as someone who could turn around struggling divisions and create sustainable growth strategies. My success was entirely my own, built on my skills, my work ethic, and my ability to focus on my career without constantly dealing with family financial crises. David and I had welcomed a second child, a son we named Michael. We lived in our beautiful house, traveled regularly, and had built a life filled with genuine relationships based on mutual respect and support. Emma had become one of my closest friends. She'd paid back over $50,000 of the money she'd received from me, despite my telling her it wasn't necessary. She and Mark had 2 children, and they were raising them with strong values about money, family, and personal responsibility. Jake had gotten his life together after prison. He'd worked his way up from warehouse worker to shift supervisor, and he'd married a woman who shared his newfound commitment to financial responsibility. He sent me a Christmas card every year, never asking for anything, just letting me know he was doing well and continuing to work on becoming a better person. I'd heard through Emma that Mom was struggling financially in her old age. She'd never learned to manage money, and Dad's death had left her with significant debt and no savings. Part of me felt sad about her situation, but I didn't feel guilty. She'd had decades to learn financial responsibility, and she'd chosen instead to rely on exploiting me. The consequences of those choices were hers to bear. 15 years after I'd sent the letter, I received a call from a hospital social worker. Mom had suffered a severe stroke and was in the ICU. She was alone, with no emergency contacts except for Emma, who lived across the country. Ma'am, your mother is asking for you. She may not have much time left. I thought about it for a long time. Then I made a decision that surprised even me. I went to the hospital. Mom looked small and frail in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. She was conscious but weak, and her speech was slurred from the stroke. Sarah? She whispered when she saw me. Hi, Mom. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, Mom. I was wrong. I was selfish. I hurt you. Yes, you did. Can you forgive me? I sat with that question for a long moment. Could I forgive her? Did I want to forgive her? Mom, I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your benefit, but for mine. I couldn't carry around all that anger and hurt and still build a happy life. Do you love me? I love the mother I remember from when I was little. I love the woman who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework. But I don't love the woman who exploited me for years and never saw me as a person rather than a resource. I see you now, she whispered. I see what I lost. I know you do, Mom. But it's too late to change the past. Will you tell Grace about me? I'll tell Grace that her grandmother loved her, but made some poor choices that damaged our family. I'll tell her that people can change, but that actions have consequences. I'll tell her that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting bad behavior. Mom closed her eyes. I'm proud of you, Sarah. You became everything I should have encouraged you to be. She died 2 days later. I attended her funeral, but I didn't speak at the service. Emma delivered a beautiful eulogy that acknowledged both Mom's good qualities and her mistakes. Jake came to the funeral too, and for the first time in over a decade, the 3 of us sat together. After the service, Jake approached me. Sarah, I know we haven't talked in years, but I wanted you to know that you saved my life by cutting me off. If you'd kept enabling me, I'd probably be dead or permanently in prison by now. Losing your support forced me to grow up. I'm glad you're doing well, Jake. I'm not asking for a relationship or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that your decision was the right one, even though it was hard. Thank you for saying that. You were a good sister, Sarah. You were too good, and we took advantage of that. I'm sorry. 20 years after I'd sent the letter, I was sitting in my garden watching Grace and Michael play with their cousins, Emma's children. David was grilling burgers, and Emma and Mark were setting up a picnic table. It was Grace's 16th birthday, and we were having a family barbecue. Grace had grown into a confident, independent young woman with strong values and excellent judgment. She'd been working part-time jobs since she was 14, not because she needed the money, but because she wanted to understand the value of work and financial independence. She was planning to study engineering in college and had already been accepted to several prestigious programs. Michael, now 6 years old, was showing his cousins how to catch fireflies. He was a kind, generous child who'd been taught to share what he had while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. As I watched my children and my sister's children playing together, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. It had taken years of therapy, boundary setting, and painful decisions, but I'd built a life that I was proud of. I'd learned to distinguish between love and exploitation, between generosity and enabling, between family and people who shared my DNA. Grace came over and sat beside me on the porch swing. Mom, Emma told me some stories about when you guys were younger, about how you used to support everyone financially. What do you think about those stories? I think you were trying to be a good sister and daughter, but I also think they were taking advantage of you. What would you do in a similar situation? Grace thought about it carefully. I'd want to help people I love, but I wouldn't sacrifice my own future for their poor decisions. I'd help them find resources and support, but I wouldn't become their personal bank. That's very wise. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret setting boundaries with your family? I looked around at the scene before me, my children playing safely in our yard, my husband cooking dinner, my sister and her family sharing our celebration. I thought about my successful career, my financial security, my peaceful marriage, and my genuine friendships. Grace, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my parents and Jake couldn't love me without conditions. I regret that it took me so long to recognize the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. But I don't regret protecting myself and building this life. Good, Grace said, because this life is pretty amazing. She was right. It was amazing. Not perfect, but amazing. I'd learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved, but you can absolutely save yourself. I'd learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. I'd learned that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. As the sun set over our garden and our family laughed around our table, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I'd made difficult choices, endured painful losses, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. But I'd emerged stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. The girl who used to sacrifice everything for her family's approval was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, protected her boundaries, and chose her relationships carefully. It had taken me 20 years to get here, but it was worth every difficult step along the way. Sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to say no. Sometimes the most important person to save is yourself. And sometimes the family you create is more valuable than the family you were born into. I'd learned all of these lessons the hard way, but I'd learned them well. And now I was passing them on to my children, hoping they'd never need to use them, but knowing they'd be prepared if they did. The last light of day faded from the sky as we cleaned up from our celebration. Grace helped me carry dishes into the house, while Michael chased the last of the fireflies. David and Mark discussed weekend plans while Emma gathered up wrapping paper and leftover cake. It was a simple evening, unremarkable in many ways. But it was also everything I'd never thought I could have. A peaceful family gathering where everyone contributed, everyone was valued, and no one was exploited. It was the life I'd built by learning to value myself as much as I valued others. As I tucked Michael into bed that night, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes and said, "Mom, I love our family." "I love our family too, buddy. We're lucky, aren't we?" "Yes," I said, kissing his forehead. "We're very lucky." But luck had nothing to do with it. We were blessed, not by chance, but by choice. By the choice to build something healthy from the ashes of something toxic. By the choice to love without conditions and give without keeping score. by the choice to protect what mattered most. I'd spent the first 30 years of my life trying to earn love through sacrifice and service. I'd spent the last 20 years learning that real love doesn't require either. It just requires honesty, respect, and the courage to be yourself. It was the best lesson I'd ever learned, and the best gift I could give my children.